So my number two film of movies that shaped my view of friendship is Ghost World from 2001. This is a movie written and directed by Terry Zwigoff, based on a comic by Daniel Close, starring Thora Birch, Scarlett Johansson, Steve Buscemi. The plot is, with only the plan of moving in together after high school, two unusually devious friends seek a direction in life. As a mere gag, they respond to a man's newspaper ad for a date, only to find it will greatly complicate their lives. Kind of a weird summary of this movie, but I think this movie and what it does so well for me when I watch it is show how, friends, you can be incredibly close to somebody, share the same worldview, the same interests, the same, sense of self. But those things can change if the other person starts changing their worldview. People can drift apart as friends, and a friend that you thought you would never lose, all of a sudden now, like, you feel like you don't even really know the person anymore because they don't really know you, because one of you have changed. I think this movie is around two females, Thora Birch and Scarlett Johansson. Thora plays Enid, who's kind of the main character, I guess. Right away you see them as, actually you see her as an outsider. There's an opening sequence where it's like panning across an apartment building, and there's all these like typical kind of setups in there of someone watching TV, someone cooking for their kids, and then you see her just dancing around crazy to this Bollywood film, which is sort of saying, okay, she's part of this milieu, like a Rear Window kind of situation, but she stands out. She's the odd one. Then you meet her friend Rebecca, who's Scarlett Johansson, and they're both kind of odd together. They're making fun of the popular kids in school. They're saying, "Oh, graduation's stupid," as a graduate from high school. They're swaying to the same music together. I mean, you can tell they have a bond, and it's this worldview of sort of seeing everything as fake, kind of like a Catcher in the Rye sort of vibe of like, oh, mainstream society, commercialization, all these things are, who wants them? Screw it. Like, we're going to do our own thing. And they have a really strong bond because of that. And then when, Rebecca, who's Scarlett Johansson, she gets a job. She starts going off into the quote unquote real world now. She's graduated from high school. She's trying to find an apartment. She's kind of integrating herself into this quote unquote normal society that, as high schoolers, they were both fighting against. And then Enid is and kind of going the opposite direction. She's being more drifted away from quote unquote normal society, finding a friend in an older male who's an odd duck himself, like is obsessed with records and old timey things, which again is he's part from society. But that is what Enid is attracted to because that is her essence and how she views the world. And as Rebecca kind of goes into society, Enid is then kind of left there without a friend, and she basically ends up at the end of the film kind of leaving off on a bus to go off, and just because she can't fit into society, and she has no one with her anymore because Rebecca has, there's a scene in the film where Rebecca invites her over to this apartment that they were going to rent together, and before they were kind of making fun of weird people in cafes and wanting to always go to like a sex shop because they thought it was funny, and that was like their humor. And now she finds fascinating a ironing board that comes out of the wall. And like, that is like the coolest thing to her, which, earlier in the film, Rebecca would have said, this is the dumbest thing. Why would anyone think it's cool? She now thinks it's cool. And that's a really realization, I think, for Enid of like, wow, like we've really drifted apart as friends. And now I have to go off into the world on my own because this friend is no longer someone who shares the same worldview. So, in terms of friends, I do think this movie shows what bonds people together, but then also as people change and evolve over time, if that bond is a shared worldview and those things change, you unfortunately do drift apart, even though you maybe never have thought that could happen. So it's kind of sad in a way, but at the same time, it's, these people are two individuals going on their own paths, and if Rebecca's path ends up being, a normal kind of like suburban life as part of the system, and that makes her happy, that's great. And if Eden needs to kind of be outside of that and kind of drift along and be more on the fringes of quote unquote normal society, then hey, that's fine too. The movie's not making any kind of judgments either way. It's just kind of showing the breakup of friendship. So that's why I think this movie is important in terms of showing that that friendship between these two girls. It's kind of sad to watch it change, but I think again, it's like that's life sometimes. I think this is enigmatic. A lot of friendships that I've had that no longer have. I have a lot of friends that I've been close to for a certain period of time, maybe in college and high school, and then definitely drifted apart. Not for any fault of, there wasn't a falling out necessarily. And just like in this movie, it's not like Enid and Rebecca get in some huge fight. I mean, yeah, there are fights that they get into, But it's just they change and you grow
Right.
up, and that sometimes you do grow apart. And I've definitely felt that with certain, you know, again, I'd see so and so on the street again, or want to wish them well and hope that they're doing okay.
Hmm.
But you know, it's not like you no longer feel that bond with them anymore. And that's something that's harder to kind of describe what that bond is sometimes, of why you feel connected to somebody, in the same way that it might be mysteriously appear, kind of like an ET, right? These people just come together, ET and
Hmm.
Elliot. They don't really know why, but they're together. In the same way that feeling can go away as well. And then now you're no longer close to this person, even though, you know, you still care about them in some way. So yeah, I've definitely had those friendships before where you felt really close to someone, and now don't really longer talk to them anymore.
Yeah,
And I think this movie
no.
does a good job with that.
Yeah, like I was saying, for folks that I grew up with and went to undergrad with and such, this movie definitely reminded me a lot of that. That we would go do stuff together.
Hmm.
I don't even know in that moment if I was fully into it. Maybe I was, sort of, not so much, but I faked it anyway because we were together. And then as time went on, I took on my own stuff and they took on their own stuff, and that's totally fine. So I think this movie does a great job of kind of doing that. Um, I'd never seen this movie before. I'd heard about it. It was a bit of a tough watch. Part of it also is that not just the sadness of it, but this world and what Enid is drawn to.
Hmm.
Not that I only want to watch people who are likable. Of course not. Like, I'm more than happy and maybe even happier watching people who are unlikable and complicated, which is sort of how she is. I don't know. Maybe there's something about the writing or something about her performance or something about the way the movie's directed. It it sort of straddle this line between, I would get pulled in the performance, but then often the whole thing felt like a play to me. Then I would sort of lose interest and sort of then pull back in. So it was a very kind of a yo-yo
Mm.
like experience of watching this movie. And I don't know, maybe it has to do with, I guess, the directing, perhaps, that maybe more time needed to be spent in really creating this world and fleshing it out, and not just feeling it a little bit surface level. But
Hmm.
then maybe that's intentional because the people that we are meeting here are also kind of like that. So maybe that's intentional, but I don't know. It took me a while to kind of get inside this movie and really be with it. um Maybe there's a performance thing too. I think Scarlett Johansson's performance is quite weird, and maybe
Mm.
that's just intentional, but I just was like, what is happening? What are you doing? This very odd. The only person who stands out to me is Steve Buscemi, who
Mm.
is, I think, gives a great performance. Just, and that's what great actors do, even if the writing and the directing is not up to the mark, is that it's a very fleshed out, layered performance. You can see what is up, has been up with this person, versus with the two girls, it's sort of hit or miss. But again, maybe that's intentional because they are also finding themselves at their age. So that's when we are meeting them. So I don't know. I found this movie challenging. That said, it definitely captures that theme of, being together with people and then just falling out or losing out with them. So yeah.
Yeah, I can see the hard, like this movie kind of being, yeah, like interesting to kind of connect with. I guess for me, like this film, I was kind of predisposed to to like it. I feel very connected to like every character in it, and almost feel like this movie is like very personal to like me as who I am as a person.
Hmm.
So I think it was then easier for me because I saw myself represented in almost every character, sort of facets of my own
Hmm.
personality.
Hmm.
Makes it then easier for me being able to look
I
beyond these
felt
things
that watching
that
it,
you,
and I knew
yeah.
why you are drawn to it. Actually, I know you well
Yeah.
enough that I
Yeah,
felt it.
I was gonna say, like, if maybe this is a future episode we'll do, but if someone were to say, like, a total stranger, like, give me, a couple movies, and if I watch those movies, I know who you are, for sure this movie would be in here. Like, this movie kind of defines
Mm,
my identity in a lot of ways, that every time I watch it, it's even like more impactful to me for that reason. For some, it's,
mm.
yeah. But I think that makes it easier for me to kind of look beyond some things that might be harder for you to connect with, in terms of the directing and the writing. But yeah, it's a movie again that just reminds me of a lot of those friendships
Yeah,
that
no,
are
I
no
get
longer
it.
that I'm no longer in.
Yeah, and I get, why this is personal to you, and I definitely have those movies. If I see myself in them, then I'm willing to ignore a lot
Right.
of the flaws of those movies.
Yeah.
So this sounds like it's definitely one of those for you. But it's a great kind of time capsule of that time as well. Record stores and records and coffee shops of that kind feel kind of new. The
Hmm.
whole setup is so amazing in that sense. And I only wish that, well, now this movie would not get made, or maybe, but
I don't know.
I wish somebody, a better director with a more deft hand, had directed this. This movie would be a masterpiece, honestly.
Hmm.
But still, I'm glad I checked it out, though.
Hey there, it's Alex. If you like the review and discussion Karan and I just had, make sure you subscribe to our channel, Movies That Shaped Us, to get full episodes. Every other Wednesday, Karan and I cover a topic around important people, places, events, and moments in our lives, and then explore it through 3 of our favorite movies. Subscribe right now, or follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts via the link in the description below. Hope you join us for the journey.